I gotta stop. I'm working on my shit too much. I gotta stop. I promised myself I wouldn't work tomorrow. I probably will. It's all very stupid. We'll give a couple minutes for people to show up. Sorry. Okay. No. You guys have my attention now. God fuck. It's just one of those weeks. Everything is falling apart. Always. Where the fuck did this thing even fall? Surely if I keep pulling it forward it will come back up, right? Okay, there we go. Somehow 3 times as tangled as it is. There's a highlighter function? What? Weird. Okay. So it appears that nobody's here yet. Oh, wait. No. There's one person. Alright, the first person in chat gets to pick what kind of thing we read. In the light of life being terrifying, I have also added various bedtime stories to my repertoire. So if you would like to request a Hans Christian Andersen or Grimm's bedtime story, or anything in that vein, please feel free. Sometimes we need to feel like, I don't know, snuggled up in bed after a warm cup of milk and some cookies and shit. Like, sometimes it be that way. Also, y'all redeem so many points. But yes, feel free. I, for one, need to stop staring at this document. minimizing the work, Wolfie. Wolfie. Fine. Alright. Let's start. Let's start somewhere. So indecisive. Alright. Let's try here. You know what I ought to do? I ought to just put a list of my library on the Discord and like just have you guys pick the one you want. It wouldn't even take much effort. Well, the problem is I keep adding to it, so I'd have to keep doing it. Fuck. I'll think about it. Oh, an edge head's gone. Oh well. Alright. This first one is called The Greedy Man and the Goat. I don't know where this is going. A Tale from Russia. Ah. Okay. The old man's wife died the very day his goat disappeared. He wept. How could he pay for a decent funeral if he has no goat's milk to sell? He trudged through the snow to his greedy neighbor's house. Perhaps he could borrow some money. But as he walked along, he saw hoofprints that seemed familiar, leading directly to his neighbor's yard. And when he knocked on the door, he smelled savory goat stew cooking over the fire. The old man was trembling by the time his neighbor appeared. "Oh, where's my goat?" he cried. "What goat?" the neighbor asked, and he quickly rubbed the back of his hand across his chin, wiping off a glob of gravy. "My only goat," the poor man shouted. "The goat who was going to help me pay for my wife's funeral." "Ah, who knows what happened to your goat?" growled his neighbor. "It's not in a field with mine. And don't bother me for money. I have none to spare." He slammed the door so quickly that he didn't hear the old man's anguished curse. "May the fate of my goat befall you!" The poor man returned home, moaning, "At least I can dig a proper grave for my wife." He picked up his tools and went to the graveyard. The ground was frozen, but he chopped it with his axe and scooped it with his shovel, removing icy chunks of dirt. His fingers and toes ached from the cold, but he dug deeper and deeper into the earth. Just as the sun was about to set, he noticed something round at the bottom of the hole. He pulled the pot out of the dirt and pried off the lid. And what did he find inside? Gold coins. The old man was overjoyed. Now he could give his wife the finest funeral his village had ever seen, with a gleaming coffin and elaborate church service. Oh, that's sweet. After the funeral was over, he, invite, he invited everyone to his hut for dinner, even his greedy neighbor. The old man had begun to wonder if he had judged him too harshly. When the neighbor saw all the fine food and drink, the crusty bread and the tempting sweets, he piled his plate high. But even as he gorged himself, he was not happy. He could not imagine where the poor man had found the money to pay for such a feast. The neighborhood continued eating until everyone else had left. Then the neighbor turned to the old man and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Where did you steal the money?" he bellowed. "Nowhere," cried the old man. "That would be a sin." He raced to his cupboard. "I found this pot of gold when I dug my wife's grave." The greedy man's face flushed with anger. He could hardly stand the poor man's good fortune. He wanted that pot of gold for himself. He thought about it every day and dreamed about it every night. Finally, he thought of a way to get it. "Wife," he said, "I'm going to kill our biggest goat and skin it, horns, beard, and all. Then I want you to sew the goat skin around me." The greedy man's wife was sure he had gone mad, so she dared not argue with him. When he brought the goat skin into the house, she ran to find her needle and her thread. Stitch by stitch, she sewed the skin round her husband, and when she finished, it covered every inch of his body. The greedy man waited until everyone in the village was asleep. Then he trotted directly to the old man's hut. He put his cloven hooves up on the windowsill, and he butted the glass with his horns. "Give me the gold," he demanded, speaking through the lips of the goat. The old man shuddered. He thought a demon was peering through his window, an angry demon who had discovered its gold was missing from the graveyard. The old man leaped out of bed. "Take it," he cried, throwing it out on the door. The goat picked up all the gold with his teeth and hurried home. He butted open the door and galloped inside to find his wife. "Help me out of this goat skin," he shouted. "It's getting tighter. It's pinching me." His wife grabbed a knife and started cutting the stitches, but no matter how carefully she cut, blood flowed. "Ow!" he screamed. "Stop hurting me." She grabbed her sewing scissors and cut the stitches even more carefully than before, but still, the blood spurted forth, spattering her dress and dripping on the floor. "Tug it off," he wept. "I can't stand being cooped up in this smelly hide." But even when she pulled and twisted and tore at the goat skin, it stuck to his body like glue. In desperation, the greedy man galloped to the poor man's hut and flung the pot of gold on his doorstep. But still, the goat skin stuck tight. Worse yet, his cries sounded more and more like those of a goat. He raced home bleating, with a pack of dogs nipping at his heels. "Even dogs think I am an animal," he moaned. He tried to tell his wife, but she could no longer understand him. He shook with terror from head to tail. The goat skin had grown onto his body. He would have horns and hooves and scraggly goat hair for the rest of his life. "Serves you right, you greedy old man," said his wife. She put the rope around his neck and led him to the goat pen behind the barn. When she went out to feed the goats next morning, she could not tell one goat from another. What will I do? She wondered, when the butcher comes. Damn. That one was actually pretty good. My expectations were not super high, but that one was not bad. Huh. Sorry, I was looking at the citations. Oh, that's cool. Huh. Nice. Okay. Did I forget to sell out? Does nobody know that I'm doing this? No? Okay. No, it's just a quiet night. Weird. Hello, VOD people. Looks like you and I are gonna be chilling out for a minute. Alright. So... let's do... let's do one from Native America. Alright. This is from the Sweetgrass Cree in the subarctic. Burnt Stick and the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a fearsome two-faced giant with a taste for human flesh, who appears in stories from the Algonquin and Dene tribes. In this story from the Sweetgrass Cree of Saskatchewan, Canada, we learn that the Wendigo is so dangerous that even the Wissaquetchak, the main Algonquin culture hero, is afraid of it. Here a girl named Burnt Stick comes to live with 11 brothers who escaped the Wendigo, and who are also accompanied by Wissaquetchak. Wissaquetchak. But Burnt Stick is no ordinary girl. From the very moment of her arrival, it is clear that she has supernatural origins. Her capture by the Wendigo, which she escapes with the help of the creature's grandmother, is what eventually leads... oh, these are all spoilers. Oops. Alright. Once, there was a dreadful Wendigo who had made it his task to destroy every human being in the world. He attacked encampment after encampment, killing and eating as many people as he could. After one attack, 10 young men managed to escape together. Get out of here. When the Wendigo found out that they had escaped, he chased after them, but they always managed to find a new place to camp and leave before the Wendigo could catch them. The young men had fled so quickly that they left their little brother behind. They went back to get their little brother and then moved on. The young men and their little brother found a good place to set up their encampment. It was a good place. It seemed safe from the Wendigo, while the elder brothers did the hunting and the other tasks that the men do. The younger brothers stayed in the lodge and did things like tend the fire. One day, as the younger brother was tending the fire, he stepped on a piece of wood. He found a splinter had pierced the skin of his soul. The young boy pulled the splinter out of his foot and then threw it out the door of the lodge. No sooner had he done that than a little girl child came crawling in. "Oh, no, you don't," said the young boy. "I don't know how to take care of a girl, and neither do my brothers." And so he took the girl child and put her outside the lodge. I don't know why that's funny. Oh no, we're not doing this. Not a moment later, the girl child came back in. She was much bigger than she'd been before. But again, the young boy put her back outside. Another time the girl came in, and this time she looked at the boy and said, "Big brother," to him. The boy set her outside yet again, thinking to himself, maybe when she comes back next time, she'll be all grown up. If she's been sent to us by the spirits, then she'll be grown up and she can stay with us. Sure enough, the girl came back, and this time she'd grown into a young woman. "Come in and sit down, big sister," said the young boy, and so she came into the lodge. The young boy gave her the name Burnt Stick. The boy introduced Burnt Stick to his brothers, and they were glad to have her join them to do the work that women normally do. Now, at this time, Wissa Ketchuk was also staying with the 10 young men, and he was with them because he was terribly frightened. The Wendigo was such a fearsome beast that even Wissa Ketchuk ran from him. Wissa Ketchuk stayed with the young men because they knew much about the ways of the Wendigo, how it hunted, and which paths it walked. When Wissa Ketchuk met Burnt Stick, he said, "Welcome, little sister." And it was then that the young men and their little brother knew it was right for Burnt Stick to stay with them. And so this little band lived together and worked together. The young men hunted and fished, and did all the work that men usually do, while Burnt Stick tanned hides and sewed clothing, and cooked all and did the work that women usually do. And for a time they were all happy together in that place. One day, Wissa Ketchuk said to Burnt Stick, "We have been here for some time. The Wendigo probably knows where we are, but your brothers and I need to go away for a few days, and you must stay here by yourself. If you do what I tell you, you'll be safe. First, you must go out and collect enough firewood to last you 4 nights. Whenever you are gathering firewood from now on, do not pick up anything else but the wood. While we are not home, you might hear someone calling to you, but you must not answer. For the 4 nights we will be away, it will be very cold. You might hear what sounds like our voices outside the lodge. but she will not see us. You must stay inside and not open the door. The Wendigo is sure to be abroad while we're away, and he has such great power that even I am afraid of him." The young woman followed Wisakechak's advice. She went to the forest and gathered a lot of wood for the fire. She also cut down a tree and split the wood to use as well. She put all the firewood inside the lodge and sealed the door because the weather had become very, very cold. After a little while, she heard someone say, "Little sister, we've returned." But Burnt Stick remembered that Wisakechak had told her. She didn't answer, and she didn't open the door. Then she heard what sounded like her brothers suffering from the cold. "We're dying," the voices said. "We're dying from the cold. Open the door and let us in." Burnt Stick didn't open the door, and in the morning, when she went outside, there were no footprints at all. Wisakechak was right, she thought. The Wendigo did come last night, and he tried to trick me. After 4 nights, the men came back to the lodge. Burnt Stick had followed Wisakechak's instructions and had stayed safe the whole time. The morning after the men came home, Burnt Stick went to collect wood for the fire. But this time, she forgot Wisakechak's warning, and she picked up a pretty feather she'd found on the forest floor. Suddenly, the Wendigo came out of the feather, saying,
"Aha! I have you at last. You are young and tender, and you shall make a tasty dish for me when you have been properly fattened."
The Wendigo picked up Burnt Stick, threw her over his shoulder, and strode back to his home. Now, the Wendigo lived with his old grandmother, and it was she who cooked the people that he brought home to eat. When the Wendigo arrived home with Burnt Stick, he put the girl down and said,
"Hey, grandmother, look at this tasty morsel I found. Fatten her up nicely for me, for I intend to feast on her when she is ready."
For a time, Burnt Stick lived with the Wendigo and his grandmother. Then came the day when the Wendigo decided that he would eat Burnt Stick. He told his grandmother to kill the girl and cook her, and then he went out. The grandmother did not want to kill Burnt Stick because she had become fond of the young girl. The grandmother went to Burnt Stick and said,
"Grandchild, the Wendigo wants me to kill you so that he can eat you, but I don't want to do that. I already had a long life. Take that axe there and kill me by striking the head with it, and put me on the pot instead. When you have done that, run far away from here. Go in that direction when you leave. You will see 4 hills in front of you. You must climb each one of those. When you have crossed the hills, you will find an iron house. Knock on the door of that house and ask for help. The one who lives there can kill the Wendigo. Say to the one who lives there, 'Big brother, help me. The Wendigo wants to eat me.' And then you will have good help."
Apparently, fuck my grandson. When grandmother was done instructing Burnt Stick, the young woman took the axe and killed her. Then she skinned the grandmother, cut her up, and set her in a kettle over the stove to cook. As soon as the meal was done cooking, Burnt Stick ran out of the Wendigo's house in a direction the grandmother had told her to go. Burnt Stick came across the first hill. She climbed up one side and down the other. Then she came to the second hill, and she climbed that one as well. But as she began to climb the third hill, she heard the roaring voice of the Wendigo behind her. The Wendigo had discovered that he had eaten his grandmother instead of having eaten burnt stick, and he was very angry.
"You will never get away from me!"
roared the Wendigo.
"I will follow you everywhere, and I will surely find you and eat you."
Burnt Stick ran even faster. She went down the third hill and climbed up the fourth. As she crested that hill, she looked behind her, and there in the distance was the Wendigo, running as fast as he could to catch her. Then Burnt Stick looked down in front of her, and there was the iron house as the grandmother had told her. She ran as fast as she could, and began pounding on the door and shouting, "Please, oh please let me in. The Wendigo is chasing me." But these were not the words that grandmother had told Burnt Stick to use, so the people inside the house did not open the door. Finally, Burnt Stick remembered what she had to say. "Big brother, help me. The Wendigo wants to eat me." As soon as Burnt Stick had said these words, the door opened, and she went inside the house. Inside, there was a young man and a young woman. The young woman said to Burnt Stick, "Sister-in-law, welcome. Please sit down." No sooner had Burnt Stick sat down than they heard the Wendigo roaring its way around the house.
"Open this door!"
screamed the Wendigo.
"Open this door and let me in. I mean to have that girl for my dinner. Open up!"
The young man took up his axe and opened the door. As soon as the Wendigo stuck its head in, the young man swung the axe and chopped off the Wendigo's head. The young man and the young woman welcomed Burnt Stick into their home. She lived with them for some time. The young man and young woman made a talisman for Burnt Stick to carry with her. "This will give you Manethol power," they said. They also made men's clothing for Burnt Stick to wear, and dressed as a man, and she went out hunting every day. One day, the young man and the young woman said to Burnt Stick, "Your brothers miss you. You really should go visit them. But on your way home, take care. There's an evil man who lives in a huge teepee. He likes to climb into trees and jump down upon people who pass by. Every time he lands on someone, he breaks their bones. Sometimes he even kills them. Now, he will not try to kill you if you are dressed like a man. He only jumps on women. Maybe you can do something about that evil man when you come across him." Burnt Stick began her journey homeward. She tried to avoid the evil man's camp, but he had seen her approaching from afar and met her on the trail. Thinking Burnt Stick was a man, the evil one said, "Come and enjoy hospitality at my lodge." Burnt Stick couldn't refuse for fear of raising his suspicions. They walked on for a time, and slowly it dawned on the evil man that Burnt Stick was, in fact, a woman and not a man. He made a plan to jump on her out of a tree, but not before he had frightened her by showing her all the young women whose bones he'd broken, whom he'd forced to live with him. Ugh. Burnt Stick sensed that the evil man had discovered who she really was, so she picked up a long piece of Saskatoon wood and pretended she needed it for a walking stick. The evil man led Burnt Stick to his lodge, and there she saw the broken bodies of all the women he'd harmed. Burnt Stick felt sorrow and anger for them. She vowed to stop the evil man from hurting anyone else. "Come and sit here," said the evil one, and Burnt Stick took the seat she was offered. Then the evil one went out of the lodge to climb his tree and wait for Burnt Stick to come looking for him. After the man had been gone for a little while, Burnt Stick held up her walking stick and said, "Walking Stick, turn yourself into iron, and let that evil man impale himself upon you." The stick turned to iron, and so Burnt Stick went to the tree where the evil man had hidden himself. Thinking that his plan had worked, the man leaped out of the tree at Burnt Stick, but she held out the iron rod she'd made out of the Saskatoon walking stick, and the evil man was impaled upon it and died. Burnt Stick went back to the evil one's lodge. She healed all the women who had broken bodies. She restored the dead ones to life. Selecting 10 of the women to accompany her, Burnt Stick finished her journey toward her brother's house. When she arrived, she found that all of her brothers were in mourning. Oh, they cried. "The Wendigo has eaten our little sister. The Wendigo has eaten Burnt Stick." Burnt Stick stood before her brothers and said, "Do not mourn. I'm here. The Wendigo has not eaten me." The brothers rejoiced greatly that their sister was still alive. They listened in wonder as she told them her tale. Then she introduced the 10 women she brought with her. "These women I saved from the evil one, and they've consented to be wives to you." Did they? Burnt Stick's brothers married the women, and they were very happy together. I guess they did. Not many days after the wedding, Burnt Stick stood before her family and said, "I must leave you now. I'm not a human being. I hear my father calling me back to him. I will turn into a deer, and in that form, I shall leave you, since I have finished the work I was sent here to do." Damn. The Native Americans know how to tell a good story. Such a quiet night. I have a couple more left in me. Let's see. Here's one. I lied. That wasn't a good one. Let me see. I'm just gonna pick a rando. And this one's called "The No Bird Sings." The red chimneys of the house for which I was bound were visible from just outside the station, at which I had alighted. And so the chauffeur told me. The distance was not more than a mile's walk, and if I took the path across the fields... Oh, not more than a mile's walk if I took the path across the fields. Sorry, my brain is frazzly. I got distracted by the sound of rain and thinking about how pleasant bird song is when it's raining. They sing in the rain sometimes, you know. It's hardest to record, but I think their song is most sweet when it's raining. There was a catbird last year. A gray catbird, which is the bird I study. One that we knew, he had him color banded. We called him Yui, because he has a favorite phrase.
Hello, it's Yui!
Delightful bird. I hope he comes back this year. He probably will. They live up to 9 years, I hear. But anyway, there was a violent thunderstorm. Violent thunderstorm. And even when the lightning was at its brightest and the thundering shook the little house that my coworkers and I were in, we heard Gooey singing straight through the thunder in torrential rainpour.
Hello, it's Gooey!
Among other phrases. Tenchi probably would have appreciated that. Probably will. If when he comes back and I can tell him about all the birds. But that's not the story. God, why do you guys listen to me? Why do you guys let me speak? Probably because you're not here. Alright. This story is called And No Bird Sings. The red chimneys of the house for which I was bound were visible from just outside the station, at which I alighted, and so the chauffeur told me. The distance was not more than a mile's walk if I took the path across the fields. It ran straight till it came to the edge of that wood yonder, which belonged to my host, and above which his chimneys were visible. I should find a gate in the paling of this wood, and a track traversing it, which debouched close to his garden. So, this adorable afternoon of early May, it seemed a waste of time to do, other than walk through the meadows and woods. Oh, hard agree. And I set off on foot, while the motor carried my traps. 'Twas one of those golden days which every now and then leak out of paradise and drip to the earth. Spring had been late in coming, but now it was here with a burst, and the whole world was boiling with the sap of life. Never have I seen such a wealth of spring flowers, or such vividness of green, nor heard such melodious business among the birds and the hedgerows. This walk through the meadows was a jubilee of festal ecstasy. And best of this all, so I promised myself, would be the passage through the wood, newly fledged, with milky green, that lay just ahead. There was a gate, just facing me, and I passed through it into the dappled lights and shadows of the grass-grown track. Coming out of the brilliant sunshine was like entering a dim tunnel. One had the sense of being suddenly withdrawn from brightness of the spring into some subaqueous cavern. The treetops formed a green roof overhead, excluding the light to a remarkable degree. I moved in a world of shifting obscurity. Presently, as the trees grew more scattered, their place was taken by a thick growth of hazels, I mungled the consonants on that, which met me over the path, And then, the ground sloping downwards, I came upon an open clearing covered with bracken and heather, and studded with birches. But though now I walked once more beneath the luminous sky, with the sunlight pouring down, it seemed to have lost its effulgence. The brightness, was it some optical illusion? It was veiled as if it came through a crepe. Why a crepe? Yet there was sun still well above the treetops in an unclouded heaven. But for all of that, the light was that of a stormy winter's day, without warmth or brilliance. It was oddly silent, too. I had thought that the bushes and trees would be ringing with the song of mating birds, but listening, I could hear no note of any sort. Neither the fluting of the thrush or the blackbird, nor the cheerful whir of the chaffinch, well, this is definitely British, nor the cooing wood pigeon, nor the strident clamor of the jay. I paused to verify this odd silence. There was no doubt about it. It was rather eerie, rather uncanny. But I supposed the birds knew their own business best, and if they were too busy to sing, it was their affair. As I went on, it struck me also that since entering the wood I had not seen a bird of any kind. And now, as I crossed the clearing, I kept my eyes alert for them, but fruitlessly. And soon I entered the further belt of thick trees which surrounded. Most of them, I noticed, were beeches, growing very close to each other, and the ground beneath them was bare, but for the carpet of fallen leaves and a few thin bramble bushes. In this curious dimness and thickness of trees, it was impossible to see far to the right or left of the path. And now, for the first time since I'd left the open, I heard some sound of life. There came a rustle of leaves from not far away, and I thought to myself that a rabbit anyhow was moving. But somehow it lacked the staccato patter of a small animal. There was certainly stealthy heaviness about it, as if something much larger were stealing along and desirous of not being heard. I paused again to see what might emerge, but instantly the sound ceased. Simultaneously, I was conscious of some faint but very foul odor reaching me, a smell choking and corrupt, yet somehow pungent, more like the odor of something alive rather than rotting. It was peculiarly sickening, and not wanting to get any closer to its source, I went on my way. Before long, I came to the edge of the wood. Straight in front of me was a strip of meadowland, and beyond an iron gate between the two brick walls, through which I had a glimpse of lawn and flower beds. To the left stood the house, and over the house and garden, there poured the amazing brightness of declining afternoon. Hugh Granger and his wife were sitting out on the lawn, with the usual pack of assorted dogs, a Welsh collie, a yellow retriever, a fox terrier, and a Pekingese. Their protest at my intrusion gave way to the welcome of recognition, and I was admitted into the circle. There was much to say, for I had been out of England for at least 3 months, during which time Hugh had settled into this little estate left him by a recluse uncle, and Auntie and Daisy had been busy during the Easter vacation with getting into the house. Certainly, it was a most attractive legacy. The house, through which I was presently taken, was a delightful little Queen Anne manor, and its situation on the edge of the heather-clad Surrey Ridge quite superb. Surrey? Maybe Surrey. Where's Bert when you need one? We had tea in a small panelled parlour overlooking the garden, and soon the wider topics narrowed down to those of the day and the hour. Had I? Asked Daisy. From the station. Did I go through the wood, or follow the path outside it? The question she thus put to me was given trivially enough. There was no hint in her voice that it mattered a straw to her which way I had come. But it was quite clearly borne in upon me that not only she, but Hugh also listened intently for my reply. He had just lit a match for a cigarette, but he left it unapplied until he heard my answer. Yes, I had gone through the wood, but now, though I'd received some odd impressions in the wood, it seemed quite ridiculous to mention what they were. I could not soberly say that the sunshine was very poor quality there, and that at one point in my traverse I'd smelled a most iniquitous odor. I'd walked through the wood. That was all I had to tell them. I had known both my host and hostess for a tale of many years. And now, when I felt that there was nothing except purely fanciful stuff that I could volunteer about my experiences there, I noticed that they exchanged a swift glance, and could easily interpret it. Each of them signaled to the other an expression of relief. They told each other, so I construed their glance, that I at any rate had found nothing unusual in the wood, and they were pleased at that. But then, before any real pause had succeeded my answer that I had gone through the wood, I remembered that strange absence of birdsong and birds. And as that seemed an innocuous observation in natural history, I thought I may as well mention it. One old thing struck me, I began, and instantly I saw the attention of both riveted again. I didn't see a single bird, or hear one from the time I entered the wood to when I left it. Hugh lit a cigarette. I've noticed that too, he said, and it's quite puzzling. The wood's certainly a bit of a primeval forest, and one would have thought that the hosts of birds would have nested in it from time immemorial. But like you, I've never heard or seen one yet. And I've never seen even a rabbit there either. I thought I heard one this afternoon, said I. Something was moving in the fallen beech leaves. Did you see it? He asked. I recollected that I had decided the noise was not quite the patter of a rabbit. No, I didn't see it, I said. And perhaps it wasn't one. It sounded, I remember, more like something larger. Once again, and unmistakably, a glance passed between Hugh and his wife. Then she rose. Oh, I must be off, she said. Post goes out at 7, and I lazed all morning. What are you two going to do? Something out of doors, please, said I. I want to see the domain. Hugh and I accordingly strolled out again, with a cohort of dogs. The domain was certainly very charming. A small lake lay beyond the garden, with a reed bed vocal with warblers, a tufted margin into which coots and moorhens scudded at our approach. Rising from the end was a high heathery knoll, full of rabbit holes, which the dogs nosed at with joyful expectations. And there we sat a while, overlooking the wood which covered the rest of the estate. Even now, in the blaze of the sun, near to its setting, it seemed to be in shadow, though like the rest of the view, It should have basked in brilliance, for not a cloud flecked the sky, and the level rays enveloped the world in a crimson splendor. But the wood was grey and darkling. Hugh, also, I was aware, had been looking at it, and now, with an air of breaking into a disagreeable topic, he turned to me. "Tell me," said he, "does anything strike you about that wood?" "Yes, it seems to lie in shadow." He frowned. "But it can't, you know," he said. "Where does shadow come from? Not from outside. The sky and land are on fire." "From inside, then?" I asked. He was silent a moment. "There's something queer about it," he said at length. "There's something there. I don't know what it is. Daisy feels it too. She won't ever go into that wood. It appears that birds won't either. It's just the fact that, for some unexplained reason, there are no birds in it. That's set all our imaginations at work." I jumped up. "Oh, it's all rubbish," I said. "Let's go through it now and find a bird." "But I bet you and I find a bird." "6 pence for every bird you see," said Hugh. We went down the hillside and walked round the wood till we came to the gate, which I'd entered that afternoon. I held it open after I had gone in for the dogs to follow. But there they stood, a yard or so away, and none of them moved. "Come on, dogs," I said, and Fifi, the fox terrier, came a step nearer, and then with a whine, retreated again. "They always do that," said Hugh. "None of them will set foot inside that wood. Look." He whistled and called, he cajoled and scolded, but it was no use. The dogs remained, with little apologetic grins and signals of tails, but they were quite determined not to come. "But why?" I asked. "Same reason as the birds, I suppose. Whatever that happens to be. There's Fifi, for instance, sweetest tempered little lady. Once I tried to pick her up and carry her in, and she snapped at me. But I have nothing to do with the wood. I'll trot around and outside it and go home." It's the worst British accent ever, I'm sorry. We left them there, and in the sunset light, which was now beginning to fade, began the passage. Usually the sense of eeriness disappears if one has a companion, but now to me, even with Hugh walking by my side, the place seemed even more uncanny than it had that afternoon, and a sense of intolerable uneasiness that grew into the sort of waking nightmare obsessed me. I had thought before the silence and loneliness of it had played tricks with my nerves, but with Hugh here, it could not be that. And indeed, I felt it was not any such notion that lay at the root of this fear, but rather the conviction that there was some presence lurking there, invisible as yet, but permeating the gathered gloom. I could not form the slightest idea of what it might be, or whether it was material or ghostly. All I could diagnose of it was my own sensations that it was evil and antique. As we came to the open ground in the middle of the wood, Hugh stopped, and though the evening was cool, I noticed he mopped his forehead. "Pretty nasty," he said. "No wonder the dogs don't like it. How'd you feel about it?" Before I could answer, he shot out his hand, pointing to the belt of trees that lay beyond. "What's that?" he said in a whisper. I followed his finger, and for 1/2 second thought I saw the black of the wood, some vague flicker, grey or faintly luminous. It waved as if it had been the head and forepart of some huge snake rearing itself, but instantly disappeared, and my glimpse had been so momentary that I could not trust my impression. "It's gone," said Hugh. still looking in the direction he had pointed. And as we stood there, I heard again what I'd heard that afternoon. A rustle among the fallen beech leaves. But there was no wind, a breath of breeze astir. He turned to me. "What on earth, what?" he said. "It looked like some enormous slug standing up. Did you see it?" "I'm not sure whether I did or not," I said. "I think I just caught sight of what you saw." "But what was it?" he said again. "Was it a real material creature? Or was it something ghostly, do you mean?" "Something halfway between the two," he said. I'll tell you what I mean afterwards, when we've got out of this place." The thing, whatever it was, had vanished among the trees, to the left of where our path lay, and in silence we walked across the open, till we came to where it tunneled. In silence we walked across the open, till we came to where it entered, tunnel-like among the trees. Frankly, I hated and feared the thought of plunging into that darkness, with the knowledge that, not far off, there was something, the nature of which I could not ever so faintly conjecture, but which I now made no doubt was that which filled the wood with some nameless terror. Was it material? Was it ghostly? Or was it... And now some inkling of what Hugh meant by began to form itself into my mind. Some being that lay on the borderland between the two. All of the sinister possibilities that appeared the most terrifying. Finally made it home. What have I missed? Nothing. We read a pretty cool Native American story. We read a pretty good Russian story. But you were the first person to talk in chat, Sassy. You are the first sign of life the whole night. In this story, homeboy walks through woods. Birds don't sing in the woods. Nothing really sings in the woods. Thought he saw something. Just is like, nah, probably not. Goes to his friend's house. Friends just kind of moved in nearby this crazy woods. And they're like, yo. Well, as is a tradition for YouTube, yeah. And they were like, yo. What? You go near the woods? And he was like, yeah. And they're like, hey, so there's probably nothing wrong with it. And he was just like, there's something wrong with it. And they were like, oh. And so they're like, yeah, it's probably our imagination. So homeboy goes back in the woods with his friend to be like, see, we can find birds. And then they don't find birds. And now they're like, why are we not finding birds? And then they're talking about what they thought they saw in the woods. Well, as is tradition for YouTube, first, ayy. Yeah, this is definitely mostly a VOD, not gonna lie. Alright. The thing, whatever it was, had vanished among the trees to the left of where our path lay. Oh, and if you want me to read anything specific, just shout it out in chat and I'll do it next. I would also be upset if I didn't find birds in the woods. Dude, same. It's always like, I find in midsummer it's eerie when like very few of the birds sing. I've had days where like I've been out tracking for birds and I'm like, why is it so fucking quiet? And it always feels like something's amiss. And then like the next day they'll be singing again and I'll be like, alright, I guess something was just passing by and you guys didn't like it. The thing, whatever it was, had vanished among the trees to the left of where our path lay, and in silence we walked across the open till we came to where it entered, tunnel-like among the trees. Frankly, I hated and feared the thought of plunging into that darkness, with the knowledge that, not so far off, there was something, the nature of which I could not ever so faintly conjecture, but which, now I made no doubt, was that which filled the wood with some nameless terror. Was it material? Was it ghostly? Or was it... And now some inkling of what Hugh had meant began to form itself into my mind. Some being that lay on the borderland between the two. Of all the sinister possibilities, that appeared the most terrifying. As we entered the trees again, I perceived that reek alive and yet corrupt, which I'd smelt before. It was now far more potent, and we hurried on, choking with the odor that I now guessed to be not the putrescence of decay, but the living substance of that which crawled and reared itself in the darkness of the wood where no bird would shelter. Somewhere among those trees lurked the reptilian thing that defied and yet compelled credence. 'Twas a blessed relief to get out of that dim tunnel into the wholesome air of the open, into the clear light of the evening. Within doors, when we returned, windows were curtained and lamps lit. There was a hint of frost, and Hugh put a match to the fire in his room, where the dogs, still a little apologetic, hailed us with the thumpings of drowsy tails. "And now we've got to talk," he said, "and lay out plans for whatever it is that's in the wood. We've got to make an end of it. And if you want to know what it is, I'll tell you." "Go ahead," said I. "You may laugh at me if you like," he said, "but I believe it's an elemental. That's what I meant when I said it was a being halfway between the material and the ghostly. I've never caught a glimpse of it till this afternoon. I only felt there was something horrible there. But now I've seen it, and it's like what spiritualists and all that sort of folk would describe as an elemental. Huge phosphorescent slug is what they tell us of it, which at will can surround itself with darkness. Somehow, now safe within doors, in the cheerful light and warmth of the room, the suggestion appeared merely grotesque. Out there in the darkness of that uncomfortable wood, something within me had quaked, and I was prepared to believe any horror. But now common sense revolted. "But you don't mean to tell me you believe in such rubbish?" I said. "You might as well say it was a unicorn. What is an elemental, anyway? Who's ever seen one except the people who listen to raps in the darkness and say it's made by their aunts?" "What is it then?" he asked. "I should think it's chiefly our own nerves," I said. "I frankly acknowledge I got the creeps when I went into the wood first, and I got them much worse when I went in it with you. It was just nerves. We're frightening ourselves and each other." "And the dogs frightening themselves and each other?" he asked. "And the birds?" That was rather hard to answer. In fact, I gave up. Hugh continued. "Well, just for the moment, we'll suppose that something else, not ourselves, frightened us and the dogs and the birds," he said, "and that we did see something like a huge phosphorescent slug. I won't call it an elemental, if you object to that. I'll call it it. There's another thing, too, with the existence of it would explain." "What's that?" I asked. "Well, it's supposed to be some incarnation of evil. It is a corporeal form of the devil. It's not only spiritual, it's material to this extent that can be seen as bodily in form, and heard, and, as you noticed, smelt, and God forbid handled. Have to be kept alive by nourishment. And that explains perhaps why every day since I've been here, I found that knoll we went up some half-dozen rabbits dead." "Stoats and weasels," said I. No, not stoats and weasels. Stoats kill their prey and eat it. These rabbits have not been eaten. They've been drunk. What on earth do you mean? I asked. I examined several of them. There was just a small hole in their throats, and they were drained of blood. Just skin and bones, and a sort of grey mash of fibre. Like the fibre of an orange which has been sucked. There was a horrible smell lingering on them. Was that the thing you had a glimpse of, like a stoat or a weasel? There came a rattle at the handle of the door. Not a word to Jay-Z, Hugh said as she entered. I heard you come in, she said. Where'd you go? All round the place, said I. I came back through the wood. I saw not a bird to be seen, but it's partly accounted for because it was dark. I saw her eyes search Hugh's, but she found no communication there. I guessed he was planning some attack on it the next day, and he did not wish her to know that anything was afoot. It was unpopular, he said. Birds won't go there, dogs won't go there, and Daisy won't go there. I'm bound to say I share the feeling too, but having braved its terrors in the dark, I think I've broken my spell. How quiet was it? Asked she. Quiet wasn't word for it. Smallest pin could have been heard dropping half a mile off. We talked over our plans that night after she'd gone to bed. Hugh's story about the sucked rabbits was rather horrible, and though there were no certain connection between the two empty rinds of animals and what we had seen, there seemed a certain reasonableness about it. But anything, as he pointed out, which could feed like that, was clearly not without its material side. Ghosts didn't have dinner, and if it was material, it was vulnerable. Our plans, therefore, were very simple. We were going to tramp through the woods, as one walks up to partridges in a field of turnips, each with a shotgun and a supply of cartridges. I can't say that I looked forward to the expedition, for I hated the thought of getting it into closer quarters with that mysterious denizen of the woods. There was a certain excitement about it, sufficient to keep me awake a long time, and when I got to sleep, to cause very vivid and awful dreams. The morning failed to fulfill the promise of the clear sunset. The sky was lowering, and the cloudy and fine rain was falling. Daisy had shopping errands, which took her into the little town, and as soon as she set off, we started on our business. The yellow retriever, mad with joy at the sight of guns, came bounding with us across the garden. But upon our entering the wood, he slunk back home again. The wood was roughly circular in shape, with a diameter perhaps of half a mile. In the centre, as I've said, there was an open clearing about a quarter of a mile across, which was thus surrounded by a belt of thick trees and perhaps a couple of 100 yards in breadth. Our plan was first to walk together up the path which led to the wood, with all possible stealth, hoping to hear some movement on the part of what we'd come to seek. Failing that, we settled to tramp through the wood at a distance of some 50 yards from each other, in a circular track. 2 or 3 of these circuits would cover the whole ground pretty thoroughly. Of the nature of our quarry, whether it would try to steal away from us or possibly attack, we had no idea. It seemed, however, yesterday to have avoided us. Rain had been falling steadily for an hour when we had entered the wood. It hissed a little in the tree-tops overhead, but so thick was the cover that the ground below was still not more than damp. It was a dark morning outside. Here you would say the sun had already set and the night were falling. Very quietly we moved up the grassy path. Our footfalls were noiseless, and once we caught a whiff of that odor of live corruption. But though we stayed and listened, not a sound of anything stirred, except for the sibilant rain over our heads. We went across the clearing, through the far gate, and still there was no sign. "We'll be getting into the trees then," said Hugh. "We'd better stop when we got that whiff of it." We went back to the place, which was still toward the middle of the encompassing trees. The odor still lingered on the windless air. "Go on about 50 yards," he said, "and then we'll go in. If either of us comes to track of it, we'll shout to each other." I walked up on down the path till I'd gone the right distance, signaled to him, and we stepped in among the trees. I have never known the sensation of such utter loneliness. I knew that Hugh was walking parallel with me, only 50 yards away, and if I hung on my step I could faintly hear his tread among the beech leaves. But I felt as if I was quite sundered in this dim place from all the companionship of man. And the only live thing that lurked here was that monstrous, mysterious creature of evil. So thick were the trees that I could not see more than a dozen yards in any direction. All places outside the woods seemed infinitely remote. And infinitely remote, also, everything that had occurred to me in normal human life. I'd been whisked out of all wholesome experiences into this antique and evil place. The rain had ceased. It whispered no longer in the treetops, testifying that there did exist a world in the sky above, and only a few drops from above pattered on the beech leaves. Suddenly I heard the report of Hugh's gun, followed by his shouting voice. "I've missed it," he shouted. "It's coming in your direction." I heard him running toward me, the beech leaves rustling, and no doubt his footsteps drowned a stealthier noise that was close to me. All that happened now, until once more I heard the report of Hugh's gun, happened, I suppose, in less than a minute. If it had taken much longer, I do not imagine I should be telling it today. I stood there then, having heard Hugh's shout, with my gun cocked, and ready to put it to my shoulder, and I listened to his running footsteps. But I saw nothing to shoot at and heard nothing. Then, between two beech trees quite close to me, I saw what I can only describe as a ball of darkness. It rolled very swiftly toward me, over the few yards that separated me from it, and then, too late, I heard the dead beech leaves rustling below it. Just before it reached me, my brain realized what it was, or it might be. But before I could raise my gun to shoot at the nothingness, it was upon me. My gun was twitched out of my hand, and I was enveloped in the blackness, which was the very essence of corruption. It knocked me off my feet, and I sprawled flat on my back, and upon me as I lay there, I felt the weight of this invisible assailant. I groped wildly with my hands, and I clutched something cold and slimy and hairy. I slipped off of it, and the next moment it was laid across my shoulder and neck, something which felt like India rubber tube. The end of it fastened onto my neck like a snake, and I felt the skin rise beneath it. Again, with clutching hands, I tried to tear the obscene strength away from me, and as I struggled with it, I heard Hugh's footsteps come close to me through this layer of darkness that hid everything. My mouth was free, and I shouted at him. "Here, here," I yelled. "Close to you where it's darkest." I felt his hands on mine, and that added strength detached from my neck. That sucker pulled at it. The coil that lay heavy on my legs and chest writhed and struggled and relaxed. Whatever it was that our 4 hands held slipped out of them, and I saw Hugh standing close to me. A yard or 2 off, vanishing among the beech trunks, was that blackness which had poured over me. Hugh put up his gun, and with the second barrel fired at it. The blackness dispersed, and there, wriggling and twisting like a huge worm, lay what we come to find. 'Twas alive still, and I picked up my gun, which lay by my side, and fired 2 more barrels in it. The writhings dwindled into mere shudderings and shakings until it lay still. With Hugh's help, I got to my feet. We both reloaded before going nearer. On the ground there lay a monstrous thing, half slug, half worm. There's no head to it. It ended in a blunt point with an orifice. In color it was grey, covered with sparse black hairs. Its length, I suppose, was some 4 feet. Its thickness at the broadest part was that of a man's thigh, tapering toward each end. It was shattered by a shot at its middle. There were stray pellets which had hit it elsewhere, but from the holes they had made there oozed not blood, but some grey vicious matter. Viscous, sorry. As we stood there, some swift process of disintegration and decay began. It lost outline, it melted, it liquefied. But in a minute, we were looking at a mass of stained and coagulated beech leaves. Again, and quickly that liquor of corruption faded. There lay at our feet no trace of what had been there. The overpowering odor passed away. There came from the ground just the sweet savor of wet earth in springtime, and above the glint of a sunbeam piercing the clouds. Then a sudden pattering among the dead leaves sent my heart into my mouth again, and I cocked my gun. Only it was Hugh's yellow retriever who joined us. We looked at each other. "You're not hurt?" I held my chin up. "Not a bit," I said. "Skin's not broken, is it?" "No, only a round red mark." "God, what was it? What happened?" "Your turn first," said I. "Begin at the beginning." "I came upon it quite suddenly," he said. "It was lying coiled like a sleeping dog behind a big beech. Before I could fire, it slithered off in the direction where I knew you were. Got a snapshot at it among the trees, but must have missed. I heard it rustling away. I shouted to you and ran after it. There's a circle of absolute darkness on the ground, and your voice came from the middle of it. Couldn't see you at all. But I clutched at the blackness. My hands met yours, and I met something else too." We got back to the house and put the guns away before Daisy came home from her shopping. We'd also scrubbed and brushed and washed. She came in from the smoking room. "You lazy folk," she said. "It's cleared up. Why are you still indoors? Let's go out for once." I got up. "Hugh's told me you've got a dislike of the wood," I said. "And it's a lovely wood. Come and see. You and I will walk on each either side of you and hold your hands. And dogs will protect you as well." "Not one of them will go a yard into the wood," said she. "Oh yes, they will. At least we'll try them. You must promise to come if they do." He whistled them up, and down we went to the gate. We sat panting for it to be opened, and scuttled into the thickets in pursuit of interesting smells. "And who says there's no birds in it?" said Daisy. "Look at that robin. Why, there are 2 of them. Evidently house hunting." "Aw, the birds came back." Aw. But are there bunnies? Coming soon to a woods near you. Alright, Sassy. You get to pick the last one. Where are we going? What are we doing? This is like, you got the whole house to yourself. That's not the same. shit. I might have stuff from Pennsylvania. Just, like, pick a place. Pick anywhere. We got, like, bedtime stories as well. We've got Grimm's fairy tales. We've got Hans Christian Andersen. I have literally stories from the Pennsylvania mountains in here. I've got Great Britain. I've got the US Navy. Native American, Russian, plenty of Irish. We've got some Norse stuff. We've got some Icelandic in here as well. Poe. Of course we have Poe. Something about birds or fish. Birds or fish. Okay, hold on. Okay, so birds first or fish. Hold on. I know I have something about birds in here. I just put it there. Ah, here we go. Magpie's nest. Oh my god, I have choice paralysis. You like pigeons, right? Doves? So we're gonna do the brave pigeon. Working men in the heavy industrial parts of England, entrapped by the noise and filth of factory and mill, have long found freedom in releasing their pet racing pigeons. These homing pigeons were capable of flying long distances in the worst of conditions. The tale that follows is one of a particularly brave bird recruited into army service. You probably know the story of War Horse. Now hear the story of War Pigeon. In July 1916, hell broke out on the France and Belgian border in the shape of the Battle of the Somme. My maternal grandfather, Edward Victor French, served throughout this war and survived. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. However, in the many battles of the Great War, millions of other soldiers were not so fortunate. The tale that follows is true. An American regiment of almost 400 was in a tight spot. In the chaos and confusion of battle, 198 poor souls had perished under friendly fire. That's all too common. Word had to be sent to the front line for a ceasefire, but how to do this? The messenger sent over the bags would almost certainly be cut down by a hail of bullets, shell in no man's land. Soldiers had a secret weapon. 3 carrier pigeons sent from England. A plea for aid in a tiny tube was attached to the leg of one of the birds. It was 200 yards to the firing line. A tiny feathered ball was cast into the sky over the barbed wire. Mud and dereliction of no man's land. After the bird had flown a mere 50 yards through acrid smoke, there was a sharp crack as the poor creature exploded in a flush of blood, bone, feather, and beak, the corpse dropping into the mud. Determinedly, the soldiers attached another tube with the message to the leg of a second pigeon. A large, fearsome rifleman tenderly kissed the tiny creature and tossed it optimistically into the sky. This bird made a full 100 yards before once again a near-splitting crack was followed by an explosion of blood, bone, feather and beak as the corpse dropped into the shell hole. Its pretty prepared grave. Just one more hope, as the third and last bird with a message to you, attached, received a cuddle, a prayer, and the wishes of every soldier as it cleared the barbed wire. It made it 150 yards before a bullet, slicing through the smoke, winged the bird. It fell to the ground with one of its legs now only attached to its body by a tendon. Even so, this valiant bird somehow found the strength to launch itself back into the air and fly the last 50 yards, delivering its message, halting the firing, and saving the lives of 194 men. The thankful soldiers nursed this tiny hero back to health, giving it the name of Xiaomi, dear friend. At the end of the war, it went to live in America, together with the medal for bravery it had received. Aww. That was a little more inspirational than I thought it was going to be. Aww, the bird got to go to America. Best bird. Aw, hell yeah. There need to be more books about birds. Like bird stories. There must be. Huh. The poem at the beginning of this book is actually worth reciting. I talk with the sun and the wren as soon as he starts to shine. I talk with the sun, said the wren. Oh wait, whoops. I talk with the sun, said the wren. As soon as he starts to shine. I talk with the sun, said the wren. And the day is mine.
You're such a cute bird.
Yes, wren, we know. Alright. Got one more left in me. You said bird or fish. Does Edgar Allan Poe have anything about fish? Probably not. Oh. Well. There's actually a zone where fishing is mentioned more times than expected. Hold on. All right. Hold on. For every bird, there's an equal and opposite fish. Quoth the fish forevermore. you've done it. Now you've done it. Alright, Sassy, I know what we're gonna do today. Do you want to see me craft a poem live? Are you ready for this? Okay. Give it a second. Okay. Here we go. Actually make this a wee bit bigger so that we can more fully enjoy this process. It still shows up as awfully small, doesn't it? Well, it's not so bad. Alright, hold on. I gotta set the mood here. Oh, well, that's a little silly. We can't even see him. No, hold on. Alright. Oh, don't do that. Okay. Here we go. So, what I do is I have, the way I made Quoth Bob was I literally had next to me the text of Quoth the Raven. So now we have to think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So each thing is 16. 16 syllables. In da 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 da. That's the cadence, right? So, as you can see, I clearly didn't get a fucking bachelor's degree in English language arts. So, this is a real poor man's way of doing a poem. You see, I'm not them literati kind of people. I just fuck around with words, and they sometimes do what I want them to do. So, now we gotta think of a premise. Okay. First, the title. Quoth the fish forever. Alright. And we gotta think of the rhyming scheme as well. Alright, hold on. I got this. Spring was very quickly fading. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Alright, so there's a compound rhyme in here. So fading. Slowly fading. Fuck. And this is where we need a rhyming dictionary. Okay. Rhymes with bleeding. Here we go. Grading, rating, shading. Beating. Oh, here we go. That cascading. It's a very slow halting process, but I might get a few stanzas out. Spring was very quickly fading when I went out slowly reading. The eddies that cascading. Slithered between hills. Now, I almost said the hills of yore, but I don't think that's gonna help me. Hills of pine. That might change. Hills of something. Hills of something. I'm thinking of, like, when we drive up to, like, central New York to visit my brother, I'm thinking of the places where I see the fishermen, like, wading out into these, like, kind of shallow rivers that are really pretty, surrounded by, like, these big hills with these really richly, it's really richly treed. Like, there's lots of forest. Okay. It was trout that I was seeking. As the sun gently peeking. In the cool day, slowly sneaking. I'm very good at painting a picture, but I'm not very good at getting to the point. Okay. Cool day, slowly sneaking. What rhymes with over listening creek shore? Oh fuck. Well, hills of yore. here we go. Isn't that exactly what literature is, though? Probably. Okay, spring is when I went out slowly waiting. The eddies that cascading slittered between the hills of yore. It was trout that I was seeking, as the sun was gently peeking and the cool day slowly sneaking over glistening creek and shore. Okay. Trout. Or pickerel. Perhaps. To drag upon the rocky shore. Trout or pickerel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Trout or pickerel, perhaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Master taught him funny noises every day. Master taught him funny noises. That is 8. Trout or pickerel, perhaps. So that's 1 syllable short. Does Singapore have hills? I bet it does. Well, okay. Well, this begs the question, what rhymes with your? That's the real question. Rhymes with your. Here we go. Oh. Wait, more. What is actually a moor? I'm kind of... Moor. Tract of open, uncultivated land. Heath. Fen. What does it look like? You know, that could work. Between... Oh, jeez. Between the hills. And the eddies that cascading, so they're between the hills. Between sunny and moor. I think. Spring was very quickly fading when I went out slowly waiting, and the eddies that cascading slithered between the sunny moor. Now, through. It was trout that I was seeking as the sun was gently peeking and the cool day slowly sneaking over glistening creek and shore. Trout or pickerel, perhaps, to drag on the road. To drag. Okay, yeah, no. Trout or pickerel, perhaps, to drag upon the rocky shore. That does actually work, even though it's technically not the right number of syllables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. To drag up the... Let's try something. Trout or pickerel, perhaps, to drag to the rocky shore. Sodden, perhaps, instead of rocky, since they're using more. Oh, yeah, you're right. Look at this interactive writing. Ayy. Okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the next bit is 7. What's gonna work? Teamwork. Twas my goal. Nothing. After hours. After time that okay, what I'm trying to do is after blank 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 suddenly there came tugging. Oh wait, hold up. I know what to do. After so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need okay, so then spent after one, two. Well, hours might be, depending on how you pronounce it. After slow hours spent shrugging, suddenly there came a tugging. Actually, that's fine. I'm being too much of a predicament. I'm being a predicament? I'm being too picky. There we go. After slow hours spent shrugging, suddenly there came a tugging. And insistent. The fuck, what rhymes with tugging? Okay. What the hell is the dictionary? Tugging, rhyme. Hugging comes to mind. What is this fucking website? Get out of here with that shit. Alright. Okay. Okay. Insistent. Fearsome. Glugging. After slow hours spent shrugging, suddenly there came a tugging, an insistent, fearsome glugging from the hook of fishing line. That's actually not bad. I can't be mad at that. Alright. And with oh. No, here we go. Struggling. Okay. Hook a fishing line. And. Okay. Alright. Shiny scales. Twinkling. Home. Sinking. And disturbed. Every deer drinking the line. So many things rhyme with line, and I'm just blanking on all of them. Mayhem and shine. It's weak, but we'll take it. After slow hours spent shrugging, suddenly there came a tugging, an insistent, fearsome struggling from the hook and fishing line, with its shiny scales of twinkling, erased all my hopes from sinking. It disturbed every deer drinking with its mayhem and its shine. Never had such fish. Your sky is so fine. So is carp. Now was mine. Ay. Okay. Magnificent. it's... So I netted all my efforts. Oh, rewarded is going to be a bitch charm, isn't it? Oh, not bad, actually. Now rewarded for this finest fish recorded. Okay. Quickly fish into and all my efforts now rewarded with this finest fish recorded. I then quickly gently boarded this fish onto the dry land. My sea soon for victory. Seeing my ecstasy winning. Ecstasy. Catching. Godly fish. For snatching. Ignored. Nagging. Scratching. Voice. Not heard. Okay, here's where we look for the word rhyming with land. Phone, shut up, I'm doing poetry. Phone! Oh no. Oh, it's you. Sorry. I didn't mean it. Okay. Okay, land. Grand, I guess. Sand. First hand. Okay. All my efforts now rewarded with this finest fish recorded. I then quickly, gently boarded this fish onto the dry land. In my ecstasy in catching such a godly fish for snatching, I ignored the nagging, scratching voice I thought I heard firsthand. A voice. Thun. Clearly ground. Hmm. Declare. Not. Okay. Haha. Heading home. My dear cargo. Dear prize. No. Treasure. My home. Task. Leisure. Leisure is a very loose way of pronouncing that. Okay. With triumphant pleasure. Prize that I won. Thinking my thinking not of my misfortunes. Oh fuck. Great. Well, not that word. Thinking of masters. That before master. There we go. Castrated. Master. Not satiable. Statistic. Okay. I transported my dear treasure to my home to bask in leisure, to glow with triumphant. Wait. I transported my dear treasure to my home to bask in leisure, to glow with triumphant pleasure at the prize that I had won, thinking not of my disaster that before seemed to rage faster, orchestrated by that master, that insatiable Clairdun, That sadistic, awful woman who made my heart weigh a ton. No, that's a little clanky. That sadistic, awful woman who weighed down my heart a ton. Let's try that. Orchestrated by that master, that insatiable Claire Dunn, that sadistic, awful woman who weighed down my heart a ton. Cruel murderer of any fun. Okay, yeah, that works. I've renamed Lenore. Alright. From fish tank glistening. There's actually quite a few Duns in your town, too. Nice. I just needed something that rhymed with ton, and that was just where the heart went, I guess. Okay. The new fish tank is glistening. The new fish tank is glistening. It's not. Okay, from the new fish tank of glistening wall, not quite actually listening, over hot tea kettle whistling, I heard a voice not heard before. Okay, searching. Here we go. Empty. Oh, fuck. Okay, synonym for empty. Okay. House was surely... Oh, great. Almost rhyme. Unoccupied. Guest more. Oh god. Burglar is not gonna rhyme with anything, is it? Gangster. Thanks, ass. Okay. Trespass. I don't like that word. Presence. Let's try that. Hopefully this isn't boring, Sassy. I don't see why presence doesn't rhyme with essence. Okay. Okay. I misspell fluorescence? Yeah. Save the... Okay. Here we go. Damn, this is becoming a saga. I'm thoroughly enjoying your time here. And I technically caused this? True. Okay. Here we go. Okay. From the new fish tank a glistening, while not quite actually listening, over a hot tea kettle whistling, I heard a voice not heard before. I raised my head. Raising my head in confusion is better. Thinking it's just an illusion, or perhaps from the intrusion from the neighbor next door. Raising my head in confusion, I thought it just an illusion, or perhaps friendly intrusion from the neighbor from next door. Just that nice old lady Janet, or the old man who she bored. Only them and nothing more. So I crossed my house a-searching, with my stomach slightly lurching, even looking for a perching of a raven by the door. But my house lacked guest or presence when lit up by my fluorescence, save the glorious iridescence I had plucked out from the moor. Surely this voice could not be the speech of oh god, that's a fucking mess. Okay, no, we gotta change that shit. Hold on. Where the hell should I put this laptop? What the heck am I doing? Okay, hold on. Could maybe do. What sort of hell have I gotten these wires into? It's a dangerous question to ask. I don't know if I want to know the answer. There's really no good way to do this, is there? Nope. So I will do. Thank you, computer. You're helping. Okay. I gotta get comfortable here. Oh, that's a good sign. Don't know why are you doing that. Okay. Oh, moron. Okay. I'm gonna do something a little different here. There we go. Okay. From the new fish tank at glistening. Alright, so could not be. Surely this could not be. Speech. From who dragged up on the shore. Okay. Save the glorious iridescence I had plucked out from the moor. Surely this could not be speech from who I dragged up on the shore. Quite impossible. Quite impossible for sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's fine. Never showing. Is gonna voice. I don't want that word, but let me see. No, I want to make it shorter anymore. Again. Oh, once more. Hey! Once more. This poor fish is just trying to reach out to you about your extended vehicle warranty. Pretty much. Flashy fish eyes were blazing. Let's gaze through. This is a job for Mr. Synonym. Blazing. I cannot see it there anymore. Phrasing, I guess. Glassy fish eyes were blazing, its gaze through the water raising. Nails. Fears. Ghosts. Phrasing. Tapped. Asunder. No. Because that makes it sound like the heart tore her asunder instead of her touring. Okay, hold on. Interesting. Heart asunder. Utter. The carp beside me eyeing me intently, never shying, had enough of my denying his unearthly voice once more. Glassy fish eyes were blazing, his gaze through the water raising, names feared and ghosts with phrasing that would shake me to my core, near resembling that cursed woman, and my heart asunder tore. Let's say only. Okay. hoping there's not... Hold on. I need to know what that word means. Where has a history? What was her name? Oh no. Oh no. It rhymes. It rhymes. Do I change it? Follow my heart. It's gonna stay. It's going to stay. I gotta look that up again. Well, first... No. I don't think anything works quite as well as that word does. Ah, shit. It works too well. God damn it. I'm sorry, Sassy. Shit. I could go with eyesore, but it doesn't have the same... name. You love it? Okay, cool. Then I won't try to change it. Okay, hold on. We were looking for madness. Okay. Two. I had an idea, but then I don't know how to do it. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. Shatter. Test. Where am I going with this? Oh. Is that the word I wanted to use? No, devastation. Noble. I misspelled splendor. Fuck. Okay. So, here we go. In a fit of manic madness, laughing not from mirth or gladness, yet too violent to be sadness, I let out a cry of war, swung my fist with mad elation, and wrought total devastation to that noble fish-glass station, breaking glass and soaking floor, aiming to end reign of terror from that carp of great splendor, and to hear it nevermore. Splendor, I guess. There we go. It's a bit of a slant, but it'll work. Rainbow scales. I don't like that. Let's see if we can fix it. didn't plan this. Hold on. These all have to do with looking. God damn it. What does booking mean? Hold on. God damn it. Here we go. The views of all the cooking. Found by no one else. Looking good up. The anchor section cooking. Fish and more. Uh, Alright, here we go. I did it. That's grammatically fine. Okay. Holy shit, this became long. Alright. So. Wow, that took so long my laptop went to sleep. Wake up my airplane, wake up my airplane, my skin is this, my skin is this. Okay, there we go. So, here we go. Quoth the fish forevermore. Spring was very quickly fading when I went out slowly wading in the eddies that cascading slithered through the sunny moor. It was trout that I was seeking as the sun was gently peeking in the cool day slowly sneaking over glistening creek and shore. Trout or pickerel, perhaps, to drag upon the sudden shore. Wait, that's not what it says. Trout or pickerel, perhaps, to drag upon the sudden shore. I like that better. 'Twas my goal, and nothing more. After slow hours spent shrugging, suddenly there came a tugging, and insistent fearsome struggling from the hook and fishing line. With its shiny scales a-twinkling, it raised all my hopes from singing, and disturbed every dear drinking with its mayhem and its shine. Never had I ever witnessed a fish under skies so fine. 'Twas a carp, and now was mine. All my efforts now rewarded, with this finest fish recorded, I then quickly gently boarded this fish on to the dry land. In my ecstasy in catching such a godly fish for snatching, I ignored the nagging, scratching voice I thought I heard firsthand, a voice thunderous and inexplicable and clearly grand, echoing not from the moorland. I transported my dear treasure to my home to bask in leisure, to grow with triumphant pleasure at the prize that I had won, thinking not of my disaster, that before seemed to rage faster, orchestrated by that master, that insatiable Claire-Dunn, that sadistic awful woman who weighed down my heart a ton, cruel murderer of any fun. From the new fish tank a-glistening, while not actually listening. Wait, hold up. From the new fish tank glistening, while not quite actually listening, over hot tea kettle whistling, I heard a voice not heard before. Raising my head in confusion, I thought it just an illusion, or perhaps friendly intrusion from that neighbor from next door, just that nice old lady Janet, or the man who or the old man who she bored. Only them, and nothing more. Just the nice old lady Janet or the old man who she bored. Yeah, that's fine. So I crossed my house searching, with my stomach slightly lurching, even looking for a perching of a raven by the door. But my house lacked guest or presence when lit up by my fluorescence, save the glorious iridescence I had picked up from the moor. Surely this could not be speech from who I dragged upon the shore. Quite impossible, for sure. But the carp beside me, eyeing me intently, never shying, had enough of my denying his unearthly voice once more. Glassy fish eyes were blazing, its gaze through the water raising nameless fears and ghosts with phrasing that would shake me to my core, near resembling that cursed woman, and my heart asunder tore. The saying only, forevermore. That word seeming rather harmless, you might think this fish voice armless, and find me so rather charmless in this tale of endless woe. But that word, it has a history which makes my heart feel so blistery. Wait, hold on. That word has a history which makes my heart. Wait, that word, it has a history which makes my heart feel so blistery. Okay. But that word has a history, one that makes my heart so blistery. And it really is no mystery why, with that word my soul I swore. And it really is no mystery why, with that word my soul, that word my soul I swore. Huh? It really is no mystery why. No mystery why. Actually, that's fine where it is. That word seeming so harmless, you may think this fish voice armless, and find me so rather charmless in this tale of endless woe. Wait, why is woe a word? Endless. Shit. Tale. That's easy enough to fix. Okay. That word seeming rather harmless, you may think this fish voice armless, and find me so rather charmless in this tale that I bore. But that word, it has a history, one that makes my heart so blistery, and it really is no mystery why, with that word my soul swore. Actually, really is no mystery, with that word my soul I swore. Okay, that's why. With that word my soul I swore, promised all my life and happiness to Claire Dunn, that wretched whore. my devotion forevermore. A fit of manic madness laughing, not from mirth or gladness, yet too violent to be sadness, I let out a cry of war, swung my fist with mad elation, and brought total devastation to that noble fish's crustacean, breaking glass and soaking floor, aiming to end rain of terror from that carp of great splendor, and to hear it nevermore. But that fish with eyes all-knowing and its rainbow scales glowing seemed to mock the forceful throwing of its mass against the floor. No distress or blood was flowing, at least not that it was showing, even as the heat was growing, trapped behind my oven door, even as I cooked that monster, and it truly was done for, part of settling my own score. But the fumes of all the cooking, found by no one else through looking, did not vanquish that chill booking of that fish from that old moor, and his voice that cursed reminder. Actually, and that voice, that cursed reminder, never growing any kinder, put my heart through a meat grinder, leaving my chest always sore. Though I fed to my good neighbors flesh of that fish of grandeur, I would hear it forevermore. How's that, sassy? Poems at midnight. Are you satisfied with it? Here's what we'll do. There's Discord. And stories and poems. Oh, well, that's not happening. Okay. Oh, it is what it is. Applause. Hell yeah. Alright, so from the top. Spring was very quickly fading when I went out slowly wading in the eddies that cascading slithered through the sunny moor. It was trout that I was seeking as the sun was gently peeking in the cool day slowly sneaking over glistening creek and shore. Trout or pickerel, perhaps, to drag upon the sodden shore. 'Twas my goal, and nothing more. After slow hours spent shrugging, suddenly there came a tugging, and insistent fearsome struggling from the hook and fishing line. With shiny scales a-twinkling, it raised all my hopes from sinking, and disturbed every deer drinking with its mayhem and its shine. Never had I ever witnessed a fish under sky so fine. 'Twas a carp, and now is mine. All my efforts now rewarded, with this finest fish recorded, I then quickly gently boarded this fish onto the dry land. In my ecstasy in catching such a godly fish for snatching, I ignored the nagging, scratching voice I thought I heard firsthand. A voice thunderous and inexplicable and clearly grand, echoing not from the moorland. I transported my dear treasure to my home to bask in leisure, to glow with triumphant pleasure at the prize that I had won, thinking not of my disaster that before seemed to rage faster, orchestrated by that master, that insatiable Claire Dunn, that sadistic awful woman who weighed down my heart a ton, cruel murderer of any fun. From the new fish tank a-glistening, while not quite actually listening, over hot tea kettle whistling, I heard a voice not heard before. Raising my head in confusion, I thought it just an illusion, or perhaps friendly intrusion from that neighbor from next door, just that nice old Lady Janet, or the old man who she bored. Only them, and nothing more. So I crossed my house a-searching, with my stomach gently lurching. With my stomach slightly lurching, even looking for a perching of a raven by the door. But my house lacked guest or presence when, lit up by my fluorescence, save the glorious iridescence I had plucked out from the shore. Plucked out from the moor. Surely this could not be speech from who I dragged up on the shore. Quite impossible, for sure. But the carp beside me, eyeing me intently, never shying, had enough of my denying his unearthly voice once more.
Glassy fish eyes were blazing, its gaze through the water raising nameless fears and ghosts with phrasing that would shake me to my core, near resembling that cursed woman, and my heart asunder tore, though saying only, forevermore. That word seeming rather harmless, you may think this fish voice armless, and find me so rather charmless in this tale that I abhor. But that word, it has a history, one that makes my heart so blistery, and it really is no mystery. With that word, my soul I swore. Why did that come back? Go away. Promised all my life and happiness to Claire Dunn, that wretched whore, my devotion, forevermore. In a fit of manic madness, laughing, not for mirth or gladness, yet too violent to be sadness, I let out a cry of war, swung my fist with mad elation, and wrought total devastation to that noble fish skull station, breaking glass and soaking floor, aiming to end reign of terror from that carp of great splendor, and to hear it nevermore. But that fish with eyes all-knowing, and its rainbow scales a-glowing, seemed to mock that forceful throwing of its mass against the floor. No distress or blood was flowing, at least not that it was showing, even as the heat was growing, trapped behind my oven door, even as I closed that monster, even as I cooked that monster, and it truly was done for. Part of settling my own score. But the fumes of all the cooking, found by no one else through looking, did not vanquish that chill booking of that fish from that old moor. What? But the fumes of all that cooking, found by no one else through looking, did not vanquish that chill booking of that fish from that old moor, and that voice, that cursed reminder, never growing any kinder, put my heart through a meat grinder, leaving my chest always sore. Though I fed to my good neighbors flesh of that fish of grandeur, I would hear it forevermore. Okay, that's as perfect as it's gonna get at midnight. We're gonna save that shit. I love how these have become a meme. I just keep redoing that that one poem. Okay, it is way past when I should have stopped streaming. Like, laughably, we are past time. But I think that's quite alright. In the meantime, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions. Do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. And I will see all of you wonderful people at a later time. Sleep is overrated. You say that now. Take care, guys. And Sassy, thank you. That was a ton of fun.